Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, Affordable Homeownership Models, Shared Equity Mortgages, Partnerships, Community Land Trusts. It's the second series of sessions that were scheduled to take place at CHRA's Congress 2020 in Saskatoon. We here at CHRA hope you're staying well. My name is Dominika Krzeminska, and I'm the Director of Programs and Strategic Initiatives at the Canadian Housing and Renewal Association. I would now like to pass on the mic to Michael Bourque, CEO of the Canadian Real Estate Association, today's webinar sponsor. Michael will provide opening remarks. Thank you.
Thank you, Dominika, and all of you for joining today's webinar. My name is Michael Bourque, and I'm the CEO of the Canadian Real Estate Association. Our membership includes more than 130,000 realtors from coast to coast, and CREA also proudly owns and operates Canada's #1 real estate website, realtor.ca. Over the past few months, a very strange time that the best description was the twilight zone that we unexpectedly entered. Canadians have really renewed their relationship with their home. And whether it be owned, rented, or in the most dire instance, absent, no one has been spared from reconsidering where they live and the meaning of home. While our members focus on market housing, realtors know that not everyone can purchase their own home. But everyone deserves a place of refuge, health, and safety that they can call home. That is why we are so pleased to partner with the Canadian Housing and Renewal Association on a regular basis. The CHRA is tireless in the fight to end homelessness through a passionate commitment to issues related to affordable, social, and nonprofit housing. We are proud to call ourselves partners and supporters of the tremendous work they do. Housing affordability has been one of the most important issues facing the federal government, and CREA has been advocating for measures that increase access to housing with a particular focus on keeping homeownership a possibility for Canadians who aspire to it. When we were contacted about the opportunity to partner on a session where the discussion would cover creative solutions for increasing housing supply, as well as creating affordable homeownership models and practices, it was a perfect match with our priorities. So thank you once again for joining us today for what promises to be a showcase of housing innovation that I'm very much looking forward to. And with that, I will turn it back over to Dominika so she can get the conversation started.
Thank you very much, Michael, and thank you, CREA. It is now my pleasure to introduce today's moderator, Ray Sullivan. Ray is the Executive Director of Centertown Citizens Ottawa Corporation, or CCOC, a private nonprofit landlord that rents almost 1,600 homes to low and moderate income families in Ottawa's downtown neighborhoods. Ray also chairs the board of CATCO, an affiliated social purpose real estate development corporation that develops nonprofit rental housing and affordable home ownership. Ray has worked in the affordable housing sector since 1999 and is currently also the Vice President of CHRA. Welcome, Ray, and I pass the reins over to you.
Thank you very much, Dominika, and thank you to you as well, Michael, and to CREA. I think we really appreciate the relationship we've built together over the years. So I'm coming to you all from the traditional and unceded territory of the Algonquin and Anishinaabe people, and Ottawa is also home to many other Indigenous peoples from across what's now Canada. I think that's an important acknowledgement for us all in our work. We deal in places, in homes, and for a great many of us, whether our families have been here for 200 years or 200 days, many of our homes are on the territories of people who were displaced from their homes. So I'm really looking forward to this webinar. We had hoped that we'd be able to join Alex in Saskatchewan for the CHRA Congress, but the world has flipped upside down. So we're doing it this way instead. For myself, as Dominika said, our organization, we've done affordable homeownership in the past. We're looking to do it again and more of it now. We're also very interested in community land trusts. We're always interested in working with progressive builders and figuring out how we can make our our construction products more affordable to us. So there's a lot of things that I'm looking forward to learning on this webinar, and I hope you are all looking forward to it as well. We'll have about 30 minutes at the end of the presentations, the 3 presentations, for a question and answer session. So you can type your questions, as Dominica said, in the chat box at any time, and then we'll go through them at the end, and hopefully we'll get to as many of them as we can. So I want to introduce our first guest, our first speaker. Jeff Evanson is a VP at Options Home. They are the largest nonprofit developer of affordable ownership homes across Canada, definitely one of the trailblazers. They have built over 3,000 new affordable homes in the past 25 years. So we'll pass that on to you, Jeff.
That's great. Well, thanks very much, Ray. And thanks everyone for joining the webinar. So at Options for Homes, we provide the opportunity for people of moderate means to become homeowners. We also work with them to build equity and improve the quality of life for themselves and their children. Our values are empowerment and community, and as Ray said, we're the largest nonprofit developer of affordable ownership housing in Canada. We have built about 3,000 units to date. We have about 600 under construction right now, and we have about 2,000 units in our pipeline. So that just shows you a bit of what we've accomplished here. About 6,000 people are supported from our pay it forward model. We've had coming up to 20 years of partnership with Delterra, the construction firm that we work with to deliver high quality homes. And our 15th condominium project is now under development. And we have worked our down payment support program to the point where we can provide now up to $150,000 a unit in down payment support. We don't do that in every instance, but that is some of the ways in which we've been able to augment our initial program. So as I said, our partners are BMO and CMHC, the City of Toronto, where we work largely, Meridian Credit Union, Van City as well. They're not here, but they're an important partner. Tridel has been very supportive, as I said, for 20 years, and Delterra is the construction arm of Tridel. And our fund, our partner fund, is Homeownership Alternatives. And I want you to think of Options for Homes and Homeownership Alternatives as being a key partnership in our ability to move this program forward. So Options for Homes acts as the developer. We do land acquisition, we hire consultants, we do all the work that is related to the complex development of projects. And the keeper of the fund is Homeownership Alternatives, and they hold the second mortgage, and they receive the funds from the second mortgage on payout. And that fund has grown from, I guess in the last 20 years, it's grown really from nothing to close to $100 million. So Options for Homes and HOA loan the purchaser between 10 and 15% of the purchase price of the unit, and we register that loan on title as a second mortgage. It's a no payment second mortgage, so no payments on this loan are due until the unit is resold or no longer occupied by the purchaser. We provide this down payment support in the form of a second mortgage. No scheduled payments, as I said, of principal or interest are required until the home is resold or rented out. And if the homeowner voluntarily decides to repay the second mortgage, we're very happy about that. And and I'll talk about that when I talk about takeout. The purchase price is less than market, and the difference is roughly equal to the available second mortgage amount. So it's very much tied to the pro forma and to construction costs, and it's a real organic figure. It's not a set amount, but it's typically between 10 or 15% of the purchase price. And it's important, I think, for OFC and others who deal with the regulations and advice that no actual money is transferred to the purchaser. That is just a loan paper that is held as second mortgage on title. So this is really how it works. You have, say, in the case of a market purchase, the regulations require the purchaser to put up at the minimum 5% down payment. So, and then the mortgage required on a $300,000 unit would be $285,000, and they would go to bank or credit union and get that. The required household income to qualify for that mortgage is in the range of $65,000 to $75,000. With our down payment loan, the purchaser is still required to come up with the 5% down payment. We would loan $45,000. So now the mortgage required is $240,000, and the household income that's required to qualify for that mortgage is $55,000 to $65,000. In some cases, we have been able to augment that options loan through a secondary fund or through an arrangement that we have made with the municipality. So in the case of the City of Toronto, the development charges, which would be required for each unit in one of our homes, is the city actually loans that development charge amount to the purchaser as and bundles it with our loan, so to increase the second mortgage to the point where the mortgage required is significantly reduced. So in the third bullet here, you see the options loan and the additional help of $25,000. And so now the required household income is about 50 to 58. So we've gone from a household income requirement of some $75,000 to as low as $50,000 on a $300,000 unit, which I agree is a mythical unit in some cases. The total down payment support then that's available in this third case is $70,000, and that is held as a second mortgage and is paid back when the unit is sold. So the source of funds, we're always asked the source. So Options for Homes has created with its partner HOA a growing, self-sustaining and permanent revolving fund that is held by home ownership alternatives. The second mortgage that we loan to the purchaser captures the value initially created through development and land value uptick and a proportionate share of the increase in value over time, the appreciation of the unit. So this pool of assets represents social equity that is preserved and grows as a revolving fund, which is essential to providing affordable housing in the future. We use that to purchase land and to build new projects. And we look to governments and to the private sector for additional investment to create deeper and longer term affordability. So our ability to be innovative depends on people contributing to our equity stack. That's as simple as it gets, and we're always looking for additional partners and additional contributions to our equity. So in terms of the discharge, interest and repayment, the upside of this, the unit can be sold at any time to anyone on the open market. The second mortgage can be repaid at any time, even at closing, if the purchaser wishes. So the mortgage is repayable on resale when the unit is no longer occupied by the purchaser or when the homeowner chooses to voluntarily pay it. So this shared appreciation mortgage, if it's 10% of the original purchase price, when the unit is sold, then the purchaser pays back to the fund 10% of that resale purchase price. So as you can see, 10% of 500,000 is 50,000 second mortgage, and that comes from the fund. If the unit appreciates to $700,000, and that's the resale value, 10% of that is 70,000, and that goes back to the fund, and that's how the fund grows. On the downside, if the home decreases in value, then only the mortgage principal is repayable and interest is not charged. So our target market is first-time home buyers. We want to move renters into ownership. The options mortgage is only available to purchasers who have bought units in developments that Options for Homes has developed. And to be considered for a second mortgage, you have to be 18 years old and a legal permanent resident of Canada. The new home must be your principal residence. We don't provide a second mortgage to investors, and purchasers must not already own or have an ownership interest in another home. In terms of underwriting, we rely on federally regulated financial institutions or credit unions. Purchasers must be able to pass the stress test, which is currently at about 4.9%, and qualify for a first mortgage from a federally registered, from a bank or a credit union. About 70% of our purchasers obtain that mortgage from a bank, and 30% obtain from credit unions. Options for Homes develops partnerships with financial institutions who work with purchasers to provide first mortgages. And the important component of that is that we want to work with banks who will consider our down payment support as equity in the purchase. So there's no mandatory takeout. Most purchasers, however, pay out their second mortgage in between 5 or 7 years. And that makes sense, as you know, because actually if the home is appreciating at 10 or 12% a year and the bank rate is 2, then it makes sense for the purchaser to refinance. And we would have that conversation with people so that they understand that. If the primary mortgage amount is refinanced so that it is larger than the original primary mortgage amount, the HOA second mortgage must be paid off. So that's an important component that keeps the fund growing and reduces our risk. We provide purchasers with pre-purchase financial information and support. So there's a lot of work that goes on between the purchasers and Options for Homes. Operational funding, the money for Options for Homes fee comes from pre-construction and construction financing. So we don't take it from, we don't take our, we don't, the fee that we make is short-term financing. In the pre-construction financing is provided by HOA, and the construction financing is provided by banks. And so that is the initial money that's put up for pre-construction costs is paid by HOA and paid back when the construction financing is received. The administration of the second mortgage is handled through HOA. They partner with a licensed mortgage broker, MSI, which is an HOA is also a licensed mortgage administrator, and HOA is responsible for administering all of MSI's mortgage affairs. So that's all in-house at HOA. So just a couple of, here's a bunch of our projects. So our current development is called the Humber. We're just under construction now. We just pulled the permits during COVID, and we're moving forward. It's 232 units, 22-story tower. It's on the banks of the Humber, and you can see it has all sorts of amenities, but not the expensive ones, pools, and the average cost will be around 700 a square foot, and we're trying to keep the maintenance fees low at about 49 cents a square foot. We have a number of projects in pre-development. This is our biggest project to date. It's called Highlands. It's in Scarborough at Markham and Dunelm, and it's going to be about 600 units, including 3-bedroom townhouses and 2 mid-rise buildings of 19 and 16 stories. We're partnering with Habitat for Humanity, who will deliver 25 townhouses. The focus is on family oriented housing, and we closed that. We purchased that site from CreateTO, the City of Toronto's surplus land company, and the project is close to $250 million project. We have 35 acres in Guelph under control, and we are working through the secondary planning process with Guelph there, and this will be again a further evolution of our model, where we're going to be creating a complete community here. So it's very interested in, again, the overall project value is pushing up to $400 million. This is a project that is in pre-development as well, and it's with the United Church of Canada. We're working with the congregation there to build a 6-story mid-rise building that will integrate the sanctuary, and where the project value is about $135 million, and we'll have close to $30 million of second mortgages available on that site. So that's a quick view of our model and some of the projects that we have under work, and I'll look forward to any questions that people might have after the other presentations. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Jeff. That is some impressive work. And I want to remind all of the viewers that both the slides from each of these presentations, as well as the recording, will be available through CHRA after the webinar. So our next guest is Alex Miller. Alex is the CEO of Big Block Construction. He has a background in engineering and is certainly an innovative builder and developer, both on the construction and the financing side. Has worked with many nonprofit groups and done some really interesting work in Saskatoon that I hope we're going to hear about. So over to you, Alex.
Perfect. Thanks, Ray. First of all, can everyone hear me? And make sure I got the right screen up. You guys can see the presentation? Okay, well, we're 2 for 2. Maybe I should stop while I'm ahead. Okay, well, thanks everyone. Good afternoon or good morning, depending on where you are here in the country. I just have to, move this one piece out of my way here so I can see what I'm doing. Okay, there we go. So in 2018, I was participating in a BDC growth driver program for high impact firms. And I was attending a workshop at the Ivy School of Business in Ontario. During one of the sessions, one of the facilitators, Julie, she looked at me and she said, Alex, what exactly is it that you do for work? And I explained that over the past 10 years, I had dedicated my time to building a team that was focused on solving Saskatoon's affordable housing crisis. However, in the past few years, we began to notice that the problem we were solving had almost been solved. And the crisis for affordable homeownership was coming to an end. And so it left me wondering, where do we go from here and what does the future look like? So Julie looked at me and she said, Alex, there's so many other communities and organizations across the country that are in desperate need of housing. Why don't you go and help them? And it really was a light bulb moment for me. It was as if there was a shock, a jolt of energy to my system. It was that awareness, that understanding of what we had accomplished, and now an idea of what we could do and how we could provide a larger impact to others. So the question became, why were we successful in Saskatoon in addressing the affordable housing crisis, but other municipalities or organizations were still struggling? What conditions existed and exactly what was done in Saskatoon here to allow us to help make such a large impact? So I took the advice from this guy. And if I had an hour to solve a problem, I'd spend 55 minutes defining the problem, yet only 5 minutes finding the solution. And so we spent months and months and we analyzed, we interviewed, and we mapped out all of our previous experiences. And we had partnered, designed, we had built over 26 developments all across the city, and we had built nearly 1,500 homes in this city here alone. Now I could spend the rest of the presentation on just talking about the success of this one program, but what I believe can be more impactful to the people listening here today is the context of the problem. Understanding what happened, how it happened, and why it happened, I believe this knowledge can be more transferable, and hopefully it can help you in your own unique situation. So what we found is that you need clarity in your direction. You need that clear vision of where you're going. You need a very efficient process to help execute that vision. That's your structure. And finally, you need good partnerships. You need the right people in the right seats. Over the past 10 years, we had developed a highly efficient process and a very effective team, and we were solving the vision that the city of Saskatoon had identified many years prior. Because of that, we were able to make a very substantial impact. So the question became, can we have an even wider impact by applying these same principles and lessons that we learned here in Saskatoon to other municipalities and organizations? So in 2018, to avoid confusion with our existing business and the branding of Innovative Residential, which is known here in Saskatoon as an affordable housing provider, for over the last 15 years, we hived off big block construction in an effort to establish a new identity and to match our new purpose. And so we set out on a mission to revolutionize the construction industry. We do this to provide a larger impact for organizations. We do this because we believe in helping others advance their cause so they can better address the needs of their own community. We do this with a very highly efficient process so we can stop you from spinning your wheels. We learn from the old ways, but then we leave them in the past. So successful residential development, it starts with a roadmap, a process for how to solve that problem. But what I typically find is that the process is old, it's archaic, and there's usually no clarity on where we're going. What often happens is that some municipalities or even nonprofit organizations, they have a need within their community. They might even have some ideas or potential concepts for that solution. But organizations often spin their wheels at this stage. They never find that traction that they need to move forward because, well, if you don't know where you're going, all roads will lead you there. And most nonprofit organizations have a very strong team to deliver their existing value. But does that team have the knowledge, the skills, and the time to develop new projects? Through their board and volunteers, they might happen to know architects and engineers, or maybe someone who even works in a construction company. However, having some of the pieces and not knowing what to do with them or how to effectively capture their value can leave organizations spinning their wheels for years. So in an effort to revolutionize this archaic process, we've taken the same team members, the architects, the engineers, the energy advisors, the builders, the finance specialists, and we've tried to add clarity to their roles, to map out the tasks, to maximize their value in a streamlined process that has proven to be faster, more cost-effective, all while providing lower risk. We believe it's more sustainable, it's a better way to grow, and it's a smarter way to build. So there's a lot of information there, so let's unpack this a little bit. Let's start with the CMHC housing continuum. I think most of us are familiar with this graphic. Most nonprofit organizations focus on these segments here on the left, while most for-profit developers focus on these segments here on the right. You see, developers are consistently navigating this journey, while most nonprofits might only do this journey once every 5, 10, 20 years. They aren't as familiar or practiced with what is required. So a for-profit developer has to be accountable for every step throughout this journey, from the initial idea and the concept stage, to the feasibility and the business plans, to the pre-construction, construction, and operations. If any one of these things does not work properly, the developers cannot repeat this development cycle. Developers invest their own capital, they put skin in the game, and they live and they die by the success of their last project. It's a never-ending reminder of how fragile and important their process is to their overall success. Think about the other partners involved in the project: architects, engineers, bankers, builders, energy advisors. Where do they add the most value? Do they invest any of their own money into any projects? Or are they just advising on how to best do it, given their information? Who should lead the process? How many times has your organization or others you know had a beautiful concept, maybe some drawings or renderings, which you might call a vision on how to solve your need, yet after years continue to spin wheels and never get the project off the ground? What good is a drawing or a vision of what you believe, of where you're going, but you don't have an effective process to get you there? So around 2008, Saskatoon was in the midst of an affordable housing crisis. Alan Wallace was the manager of housing and planning with the city of Saskatoon, and he was brave enough to create the bold vision for what Saskatoon needed. Saskatoon needed 2,500 affordable homes in the market. In order to make this vision a reality, he worked diligently with CMHC and other partners to create the Mortgage Flexibility Support Program. Then over the years, through partnerships with local nonprofit organizations and for-profit developers, real progress began to take shape. The city had identified the need and provided the funding, but they then allowed the nonprofits to administer the program, an area where they had the most value, and then of course working with developers to bring in their team and their network of professionals to design and build the projects where they add the most value. Although the city set the vision, it wasn't them who led the developments. That's not where they are the most effective. Partnerships were essential, and understanding how to deliver that vision was key. And over the next 10 years, over 2,500 affordable homes were developed under this program, achieving the original goal and solving Saskatoon's affordable housing crisis. And so you may ask yourself, how do I do something like that? You might be thinking, well, the city of Saskatoon was willing to provide the funding and was lucky enough to have someone like Alan Wallace with a vision for this program. Maybe CMHC was willing to listen to this new idea and partnership, but we don't have that. Our association, our organization is different. Our problems here are unique, and so therefore we need a unique solution. And that's exactly why what I'm trying to share with you today is the principles on how to solve these problems, because that is what I think is the most important piece. If you can apply these lessons to your organization, you too can provide a more impact within your community. So, what does your journey look like? At the start of every journey, we need to define that vision. What is the problem and how are we going to solve it? Write it down and make it clear. Although it might evolve, it will give us clarity on what's the most important piece. Then you have to consider your team and existing partnerships. Is it an experienced team, or does it just happen to be the people that you are surrounded by at this particular time? Do you have the right people in the right seats? Are you having those tough conversations? And who is your guide? Who has your organization's best interest in mind? And do they understand the process required from start to finish? You can take the idea, the concept, you need to do the analysis. You work through the need and demand, you work through the budget, you examine the equity sources, the programs, the financing pieces, and you create the pro forma. Does it pencil? Is it bankable? Don't get hung up on the emotional attachment to a drawing or a rendering of what it might look like. It's not going to help. Not yet. Once the business plan has been proven, once the financial institutions have given you the ability to say, hey, these numbers can work, then you can start to move into how it's going to look. Only then should you really dive into a design that will address what your customers and your residents and your clients really need. You will work through the pre-development stages and the construction stages, and when you do it right, you will start to see the pieces come together. You will have bankable business plans, you'll have municipality approvals, and you will see your buildings being constructed efficiently, and ultimately, you'll start to see your vision become a reality. You'll be making a much larger impact in your organization and the community as a whole. So just like I had my light bulb moment during that session at the Ivy School of Business, and that inspired me to what I'm doing here today, I would challenge you in your own particular situation to find your light bulb moment. I believe that you are empowered in your organization to make a larger impact. I'm going to ask you today to build bold. I'm going to ask you to build better. And I'm going to ask you to build brave. Don't build blind. And what I believe building blind is when you know that there's a better way, but you choose to ignore it. Making a bigger impact by using a proven process and working with experienced partners. Partners that want you to succeed and partners that need you to succeed. You know, we don't have to waste our time learning how to make pastries when we can use grandma's recipes. So what if there was a map that you could follow from start to finish for your project? What if there was a path where you could see the steps to take, cross-reference your current position, and track your progress along your own unique journey? Well, here it is. We developed this for you. We want to share this proven process to help you avoid roadblocks and wrong turns. This is a guide we use. It has over 45 milestones to help you fast track your development so you too can create a roadmap for success. It's free, it's functional, it's fast, it's very efficient. Learn from what others have done, don't spin your wheels, and don't build blind. So as we continue down our journey to provide nonprofit organizations the tools and the knowledge required to develop a successful project and to make a larger impact, I ask you this: which path are you going to choose? Will you build brave or will you build blind? And if we do this right, together, we will all make our community stronger for many generations to come. So I would encourage you to find out where you are in your journey. You can download our Kickstart Kit for free and contact us with any questions. We're building a net zero project right now in Saskatoon. A lot of fun and exciting opportunities to be able to follow us along and subscribe and watch. And finally, I would ask you to share this knowledge within your organization and others to make a larger impact. And so I always like the Bitmojis. So I will end on many thanks. Thanks for taking the opportunity to listen today.
Thank you very much, Alex. That is a great story. And I say bring on the construction revolution. So our next guest is Tiffany DeVita. Tiffany is the Executive Director of the Community Land Trust Group of Societies in BC, and BC is definitely at the forefront of the land trust movement in Canada. One of her many responsibilities there is around future growth plans for the organizations, and representing a community here in Ottawa, we're just getting started in trying to figure out a community land trust. I will be taking lots and lots of notes. So over to you, Tiffany.
Thank you, Ray, and thank you everybody for joining us today in the virtual world of this webinar. So first things, just the other panelists that I can see, is my screen good? Okay. So great. So today I'm actually going to be talking about community land trust and community ownership of land and the buildings that are on the land. So a different type of focus when we look at affordable ownership being held by a community-owned entity versus individuals. And so as we kind of look forward to that, you know, most of the sector today and across the country, we all face these common key challenges of the cost of land and construction, access to capital, and scale and capacity, which is a lot of that stuff that Alex was just talking about, of making sure you've got your roadmap and you know, are actually focusing on what your deliverables are. And making sure that it's financially feasible too before you start going down a path that is, at the end of the day, you kind of get that vision, what he talked about, of what you want to build, and then you realize that it can actually never be built. So really kind of looking at a community land trust and how do they actually play a part, and what are they? So simply put, a community land trust is a nonprofit organization, and it has a particular goal, and that goal is to control, obtain, steward, and hold land to solve problems that the pure markets often struggle with. So across North America, there's many different community land trusts, and these are just a sampling of them. There's ones that have housing, there's preservation, and also cultural components to community land trusts. But in Canada in particular, we've got a great Canadian network of community land trusts that have started to emerge in the last few years. They've become more of an organized organization of community land trusts that are embarking upon advocacy and peer work as well. So I do encourage those that are interested in community land trust to do look up the Canadian network and see what is actually available maybe in your own backyard and other types of education and webinar series that are happening. But when we look at the importance of community land under community ownership, we realized quickly that we needed to change the conversation across the country to get people to really understand what the benefit of community ownership was. And we needed to start talking and demonstrating, like we're doing out here in BC and across the country, and you know, events like we're doing today, on how CLTs can be that vehicle for community ownership. So it's important to recognize that community land trust can build that permanent community wealth. It is mission driven versus profit driven. It builds community resilience and has community involvement and also community governance attached to it. And one of the most important things when we kind of look at community ownership of land is because we're not making any more land. So that becomes more important when we look at the decisions that of how we're actually utilizing our land assets today, and how they're actually going to be owned and what they're going to be used for in the future. But when looking at what we've been able to accomplish here in BC, we really do need to acknowledge and look towards the Cooperative Housing Federation of BC, who's really been breaking the mold and sparking conversations across the country with their Community Land Trust, which is the organization I represent, for growth within the community housing sector. And some of the strength that we're getting and in those key partnerships that need to be formed is that we're actually a group of social enterprises, and we focus quite a bit on providing a unified mission, voice, and governance structure. And it builds strength and knowledge and experience and reputation, and we bring that to the table. And that's really attracting the investment and new opportunities out here in BC for growth. So for those that don't know who the CHFBC is, they are a full service federation of housing co-ops. So they actually own Coho Management, which is a property management company that specializes for co-op housing. And then the Community Land Trust, and we are a leading social purpose real estate developer using the CLT model, which is quite unique in Canada, but is gaining traction every day. The CLT is also known as a sector-based community land trust. And I think that this is important to point out, because when a lot of people look to community land trusts, they often look to our neighbors to the south, which are more grassroots, focused on affordable home ownership. But we're not like the typical grassroots CLT, but we're rather born from the roots of the cooperative housing sector. And that has given us a very clear mandate and support from our board for growth and building a vehicle that can deliver affordable housing here in BC. And we're not actually focused on one site. Oftentimes community land trusts are very small in nature. I actually learned through some conferences that the average size of community land trusts in the States has 10 homes in it, which is very small. But our board doesn't have a mandate for the number of homes that we want to build. It's infinite. So we do look across the country for those opportunities in all different neighborhoods and municipalities. And we've really learned with our model that we need to be adaptable and flexible to who our partners are, whether they be financial partners or land partners or nonprofits and co-ops, to provide a wide range of housing. So some of the different things that we're working on is we're redeveloping and developing properties. We're actually developing support systems and working with associations and the co-op federations across Canada. We're working on building trust as well, while we're saving distressed assets that would otherwise be lost from the community housing sector. We're building new partnerships to redevelop co-ops and nonprofits, and investing new funders and financial institutions to invest in the housing. And we're actually starting to demonstrate that we're providing an alternative to the private sector as well. So this really hasn't happened overnight. It's taken a couple of decades to get to where we are. I like to refer to as our early years, which started in the early 1990s, is that we were just a holding entity where the Community Land Trust accepted 6 properties that were asset transfers from the provincial and federal governments, and really kind of an absentee landlord. Then it evolved, moving into early 2012 to 2015 as a real estate development vehicle. And then in the past 5 years, we've really moved from not just real estate development, but also portfolio management, as we are not only managing thousands of homes that are either occupied or under construction, but also the financial obligations to that, whether that be our lenders or our social purpose equity partners as well. So as part of that growth and that evolution, we've become established partner to invest in. And we've created actually multiple societies that each have their own function to support the portfolio and our partner investments. So we have a society that we developed, and this is where we house our people. And this provided management services to the portfolio. It ranges with everything from development services to finance to property management, advocacy, and also community engagement. We also developed a foundation where we provide good works and giving back to our communities and our various partners. And then we have our land holdings that are in individual project societies that can actually, each project society can actually hold more than one property to create mini portfolios. And we actually embarked upon this because the structure of land ownership then allowed us to look at minimizing our risk and flexibility for partner investors to also isolate their investments into particular properties or portfolios of properties as well. So what we're seeing with our CLT and why we're attracting new investment, which has strong support here in BC for the regrowth of cooperative housing, is that we're providing housing at a fair price, and our nonprofits and our co-op operating partners do operate at a cost as well, and we are providing that security of tenure that you don't otherwise get in just the plain rental market. We're actually working on community involvement as well. We're building life and job skills, and we're building communities. And when they're co-op partners, they actually belong to a larger movement, not only here in BC, but across the country and around the world. And we're a strong partner and community advocate for government investment of dollars and land. So partnerships and what we're doing and how that is translating into success. So I've mentioned that we're acquiring distressed assets, we're redeveloping, developing new. We're also buying turnkey buildings from municipalities that have inclusionary zoning. And this has actually allowed us to look at a decanting program for those buildings that need to actually be redeveloped or go substantial renovation, so that we can safely move all the residents out and into a new building as well. And so we kind of, when we have an opportunity to look at a turnkey building, we look at about a 5-kilometer radius in the neighborhood and see what type of assets and nonprofits and co-ops that are in distress need that renovation or redevelopment, but want to keep their communities together. So we're expanding this program as more opportunity comes up. And our portfolio today is about 75% co-op housing and about 25% nonprofit housing. We also realized that there was a need to expand and also develop our practices for ongoing community building, because the CLT just goes beyond being just a nonprofit that holds the lands and its assets. We are also looking at building our capacity for how we practice and run the organization. We look to be a place where government and organizations want to invest their money, land, and time with us. We demonstrate the community component within a community land trust and why it's important. And this is not always delivered through the private sector. We're showing that government, that we can partner and build supports and programs that foster social health for the residents. So these are 5 key strategies that we've developed for inclusion and equity, also for inclusive housing and working with various nonprofits that not necessarily don't want a whole building, but may want a few homes in a building. So we have sub-partnerships in each one of our buildings. All of our buildings have aging in place strategies, and also all of our buildings are also pet friendly. But it's not all just about the bricks and mortars, as you can see. You do need to dial in your capacity beyond the housing and also focus on the people of not only who you hire, but also the focus on the people of the housing you're serving. You need to engage in the dialogue, have those difficult conversations with people, and allow them to be at the table with you for those key decisions. So what has the CLT been doing over the past year? We've actually developed a community building toolkit, which is a training tool to provide insight and support for the onboarding and education of not only staff, but new residents. We're building our member and partner engagement framework. And we actually started a co-op cafe. And this is really for assets that need to go through comprehensive renovation or go through a redevelopment, because we recognize there needed to be a need and a different approach to engage people in those difficult decisions that they're facing today so that they can better plan for their tomorrow. So I'll just show you a few pictures of some projects that we're working on and what do you kind of get when you focus housing from a CLT model. So a lot of these are city investments in co-op for nonprofit housing, and we also have a lot of investment from our provincial and federal governments as well. So we have housing that ranges for families, singles, couples, seniors. We've got low rise, we've got high rise, multiple different partners from, like I mentioned, the co-op housing. We've got partners that specialize in mental health, women's housing, and also Aboriginal housing with our first partnership with Macola out here in BC. So just our growth and our timeline in the last 5 years, we've grown from 354 occupied homes to just over 800. We have another 360 that will come online later this year, and 1,500 homes that are currently under development and construction that will be delivered within the next 3 years. So we're constantly sourcing new opportunities for acquisition, new development, and redevelopment to build our portfolio for community-owned land out here in BC. So as you can see, we have a lot going on. Like we're actively sourcing new opportunities and educating ourselves every single day of how we improve our model and build stronger partnerships for growth within the community housing sector. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Tiffany. And I'm really hoping that this is a model that does start to spread across the country and we see it replicated elsewhere. In fact, all 3 of these presenters, I think, have talked about things that are replicable across the country, and hope they become some. So we have, I guess, about 20 minutes for question and answer session. So please use the chat box, start typing in your questions now, and then we'll get to them as they scroll up. I think it's really interesting listening to all 3 of the presentations. You know, when I look back and think that our nonprofit and co-op housing sector is really only about 45 years old. And a lot of what we've heard here today, in my mind, represents the maturation of our sector. You know, looking at the established success of options for homes and homeownership alternatives and the affordable homeownership model, the stuff that Alex was talking about really more sophisticated building and development techniques to try and find those efficiencies, and the really great work they're doing on the West Coast in those collaborative structures to help small nonprofits and co-ops team up and pool their resources and assets that ways that will build far beyond what we started with. So thank you all to each of the presenters. I'm going to ask the first question. It's a question for Jeff. Jeff, you described in your presentation the different roles between options for homes and homeownership alternatives. What was the reasoning for creating that separation between 2 separate corporate entities for those roles?
Well, that's a very good question. I think that when the model began at about sort of 20 years ago, the focus was on options for homes. and the fund, if you like, was notional, really. And I think that the sense at that time was that there should be some separation between the fund and the development arm, if you like. And I think that is makes good sense in terms of business practice. I think that as the model has matured and grown, I think that one of the things that would be useful to consider is the form of the partnership between the fund and the development arm. I think that those things actually have to work more closely together to operate at the scale that's that the sector is now operating at. I think at the time, 20 years ago, not a lot of thought was given to scale. It was just kind of a project by project sort of approach. And now you need to be acquiring land. You need to have projects in the pipeline. You need to be really working at right across the continuum. And I think the opportunity for maturation of the model exists.
Thank you, Jeff. I have a question for Alex as well. You know, in Jeff's presentation, he talked about how, you know, the affordability to the buyer is really linked to the affordability of the construction as well. And I think you talked a bunch about that, Alex. Before the webinar began, we were chatting a little bit about modular construction. And, you know, when we've talked to our builders about that, they've sort of said, yeah, it'd be really interesting to do, but you know, you need a certain critical mass so you can have a modular construction site within easy shipping distance or transportation distance to the construction site. And I'm wondering from your experience in Saskatchewan, what do you think the opportunities is to scale up modular construction in affordable housing development?
Yeah, thanks, Ray. So being young and dumb, I ventured into, you know, we didn't venture into modular to begin with. Believe it or not, one of the first things we did is we relocated an army base that was built in the 50s, and actually we won the Robert Hale Jr., the CHRA award for that 10 years ago. And it was really interesting because that's what got us going down this path of, is there a better way of just stick framing? You know, like if you look at our industry is extremely archaic. We have really not used technology to advance how we deliver homes. And we have this perpetual issue of not being able to supply the market with what we need. Now, I understand it's a little bit different than some of the other industries. It's very fragmented. You don't have huge conglomerates that own the vast majority of the pieces. But I really do think it is time for a revolution in how we deliver our housing and meet the need that we have. So yeah, we started dabbling into modular construction because really what it is, it's just a different way of building. It's just a different method. You can stick frame or you can use modular construction. I think sometimes there's a notion of what it is, or they maybe perceive it as single family homes or as trailer parks because that's how the main industry had formed. But it's been around for many years now. And so we've really taken it with stride over the last 10 years. Everything we've done is modular construction. We focus on the strengths of how to capitalize on that. And from a scalability perspective, that's how we were able to make a huge impact in Saskatoon's community. And the funny thing is, all of the units were built over 800 kilometers away in Manitoba. They're in Winkler, Manitoba. So, you know, when you really spend enough time planning and figuring out how you can solve this problem, you know what, you really start to remove some of those, the potential local resource issues that you have, and you can capitalize on other people's strengths.
Thank you very much, Alex. The two questions here for Tiffany. One, where do you get the money for land acquisition? Great question. And the second one, are the projects, what's the mix between sustainability and affordability in the projects?
Yeah, for the land acquisition, we actually work with a lot of municipalities. So land is on long-term leases for 99 years for a nominal value, $10 to make it legal under the lease. We've also been working a lot within the cooperative housing sector to actually transfer in freehold interests of land into the community land trust. And that really comes back to that relationship of the partnerships and building trust. And what we've been able to do is when the land is transferred in, we take over any sort of outstanding debt, if there is any on the land, and then we work on a partnership of arrangement of the deliverables back. That can include everything from a comprehensive redevelopment or a renovation itself. If there needs to be any sort of refinancing associated to that, Van City has been a big partner of ours, and then we have fortunate out in British Columbia that we have BC Housing as well. That's also a big partner, and we've recently done financing as well with the Rental Construction Financing Initiative with CMHC. Our working capital comes from various partners, including ourselves and a couple of design build partners that we work out here as well. So back to forming some of those key partnerships is very important to what we do. Sustainability and affordability. So our affordability range is quite diverse. We have everything from what we would call shelter rates, so those that are probably making under $24,000. And we do have homes that actually range up to incomes that are probably in the $150,000 range. The bulk of the homes, though, are in the $50,000 to $80,000 gross income range. As for sustainability, we are looking at Passive House in Vancouver. So we are looking at new and also using mass timber as well for reducing our ecological footprint with regards to our building construction practices. Most often, though, we are following the provincial regulations with energy guidelines, which we refer to as step 3 or step 4, and step 4 would be almost equivalent to Passive House. So that's kind of where we're going with the future of our housing. And then our past has really just been accepting the existing assets in their existing state.
Thanks, Tiffany. I have a question here for the whole panel. So we'll start with Jeff, then Alex, then Tiffany. And they're asking, any advice from the panel on defining the need and target occupants if a nonprofit's considering developing a project? So with other organizations, municipal organizations, and other nonprofits, how do you define your niche and avoid overlapping? Let's start that one off, Jeff. Jeff, I think you might be on mute. If you could start over again, unmuted.
I'm unmuted now. I'm not controlling this somehow. Someone else is. Well, in our case, there are, so the idea of affordable housing is defined in the official plan of the City of Toronto, and it has to conform with the provincial policy statement in Ontario. So this is the regulatory framework that governs affordability. In Toronto, there's two ways that we look at this. One is the policy, and the other is the programmatic definition. Now, the programmatic definition sort of allows support from government in terms of contributions to the second mortgage, deferral of fees, development charges, that kind of thing, to a defined group. I think it's probably depending on the size of the family, upwards of $130,000 household income, and that just reflects the sort of situation in the City of Toronto, which I realize is not the situation in the rest of the country, except perhaps for Vancouver. What we try to do is identify the number of units in a building that might qualify for this additional government support, and then that's subject to a income verification, which we will comply with in terms of programmatic. What we also try to do, as I mentioned is any additional equity contribution that we can receive, anything that reduces the cost of our construction can be passed on to the purchasers by in terms of making the units more affordable. And that's why we're always looking for new partners to contribute equity to our projects so that we can continue to increase affordability and drive down costs.
Yeah, I guess maybe just to add a little bit to that with some of our experiences here in the city of Saskatoon, when we did a lot of the affordable housing for 10 years, that target market, that need and demand was identified from the city of Saskatoon at that particular piece. They kind of gave the income ranges and some parameters or goalposts, if you will, on what kind of needed to be built. I'm still an active developer building for myself with respect to market rentals, and we do our own due diligence with the appraisers and understanding our overall the market piece, both the overall size and as well as the market share that we believe we can be competitive at. A couple other groups that I'm working with, just a couple that came to mind is one of the indigenous groups. They had such a strong need for the last 30-40 years. They have been advocating for another build. So they have stakeholder engagements, and then also another diverse housing partner that we work with. Between their board, between their staff, their volunteers, their residents, believe it or not, they have all the information is usually there. You kind of just sometimes need an outsider to help pull that information out. And I think when at the end of the day, you really should understand your core values and your mission. And then that ultimately will get that alignment on what your vision is for success.
Yeah, and just to add to that, because obviously if you're dealing with any sort of government program, you're very prescriptive and probably what you have to deliver back. But dealing with existing organizations or communities, it really does come back to what Alex just said, is that vision. And that's why in the co-op housing sector, we developed that co-op cafe, which is just a play off the World Cafe model, and really having that facilitated process that is going to draw out exactly who they actually define themselves as today, if it's an existing community, and who they are going to be tomorrow, and then overlaying that with the financials so they can actually understand how the numbers and the community and social aspects all fit together in a very kind of well mapped out and an engaging dialogue in that process, that they can feel that they are at the table and making those important decisions, and making sure that the appropriate partners are coming to the table as well for that mission alignment. Mission alignment is so key, because if you're not aligned, it will come out eventually at the end, and you don't want to have the misalignment come out after it's too late, because that is really disastrous for any sort of housing project and community building.
Thank you, Tiffany. And I have a quick related questions from the chat box for Jeff and for Tiffany. So Jeff has homeownership alternatives and options for homes ever considered building in BC, and Tiffany has the Community Land Trust considered homeownership. Start with you, Tiffany.
Sure. Yes, we have looked at home ownership. We have a large parcel out in Coquitlam. We acquired the Hoy Creek Housing Co-op, and our third phase of that has been looking at an affordable ownership model. We haven't really decided on that from a board perspective and what we want to do with our final phase, just because we don't want to make the wrong decisions. And but we have been exploring that and looking at models all across the country. It is something that we want to get into for some sort of form of shared equity to provide a different type of housing product in our own continuum within our portfolio.
And Jeff, would you go out to the West Coast?
Are
I think.
always looking at how to adjust, improve, change our model. I mean, we have a model that works pretty well now, but we're challenged by elected officials, by policy people, by others always to address the issue of long-term affordability. We're challenged to figure out how to make 3-bedroom units available at, you know, when it costs $700 a square foot to build. How are you providing these larger units? So I guess it'd be safe to say we're constantly engaged in looking at ways in which we could adapt our model to meet our vision and sort of conform with our values and also create the kind of housing that we think need. You know, we're part of affordable homeownership is an important part of the housing continuum, and we are always looking to see if, in fact, we can't expand that continuum and develop other kinds of niches and opportunities. And that's why it's very interesting to hear about, and we do monitor land trusts and other mechanisms for creating longer term affordability, which is certainly a challenge for us.
Oh, excuse me, I unmuted just in time to cough. There's a couple more great questions in the chat box, but we've only got a couple of minutes left. I was going to direct this to everyone, but I'll direct it at you, Alex. You'd mentioned a development in partnership with an Indigenous organization, and that was one of the questions from the chat box, if people could share experiences and programs developing projects and housing directed to Indigenous communities.
Yeah. So again, as a for-profit developer, my past experience, and then obviously I still do that, but also worked on the affordable housing side of it. No matter which part you are in that continuum, it is the same process, but every group has a little bit different journey. So, for example, we've had a lot of fun working with the group. I don't have their blessing yet to say that I'm allowed to talk about exactly which group it is, but I can tell you it is one of those through the IHIA programs that was done here nationally. I think there's 26 of them, and it was a really, really cool experience. It helped teach me. What's great about this, and selfishly, I know how to help navigate through the process, but I don't know a lot about all these other different groups and organizations. And so it's really fun and it's exciting for me to learn and be engaged a little bit more about how they provide their value and where we provide our value to moving them through. Unique in the sense of 7 different programs. We are right now in the midst of, between applications and monitoring and letter of intents and approvals. I mean, that the process, the Kickstart kit that I talk about, you have that idea, that concept, and you talk about the due diligence and the business plan piece. On some of the previous stuff, we've had 1, maybe 2 different programs that we've had to kind of maneuver through to make the project successful. This one we actually have 7 different program applications. So if you really don't kind of line them up and make sure that you're addressing all the different the points within each one, I mean, you can take a project that should only take 1 to 2 years to build, and you could turn this thing into 5, 10, or never. And so it's been a lot of fun to help kind of unpack that and to make sure that we're kind of following that journey to be as efficient and effective as possible. But yeah, it's a lot of fun.
Thank you very much, Alex. So that brings us to the end of our time today. I cannot finish this webinar without thanking Dominica, who has done absolutely everything that's going on behind the scenes and behind the screen from beginning to end in this webinar. So thank you from Dominica. And I want to thank Michael and Kriya for your support of CHRA and your support of this webinar. That's a really valuable relationship to us. And of course, thank you to each of our panelists, to Alex, to Jeff, and to Tiffany. And thank you all of you for joining us, and thank you for the Canadian Housing and Renewal Association for creating this opportunity for us to learn from each other. CHRA created a affordable home ownership working group about a year ago. There's about 36 people who are members. If people are interested in joining, we're there to explore this space together and learn how we can move it forward at the same time. So thank you all for joining us. I wish I could see you in person. Hopefully next year at the CHRA Congress, we can do this again and shake hands and have a beer afterwards without any trouble. Thank you all very, very much, and have a good afternoon.